Most of us singers think the problem is the high note itself, but in almost every lesson I teach and in almost every high note that I have failed to sing well myself, the note was already decided about 5 to 10 seconds before it exited my mouth or the singer's mouth whom I am assisting. So today I want to show you 4 setup habits that will make high notes feel easier, freer, and more reliable without pushing, gripping, or just slinging vocal spaghetti at the wall and hoping for the best. Hey there, my name is Dan Calloway. I teach musical theater, voice, and vocal pedagogy at Boston Conservatory at Berkeley. More than 25 years kicking around on equity stages, more than 15 years helping singers get to work on Broadway, national tours, regionally, and around the world. And I'm very glad you're here with me today. And today we're going to talk about one of my favorite reframes. So high notes, and in fact, every frequency that leaves our body in the form of music is not a moment in and of itself. It is a result of a setup of systems that we have prepared in order to flow vibrating carbon dioxide through our vocal folds and vocal tract. So let's dig into setup habit number 1 that you can start to develop. And this is body alignment that frees your sound. So I like to talk about what I call dynamic alignment, because if you are singing, you are moving. If you are living, you are moving. And so I like to think of the idea of your skeleton. When I think about alignment, I think about the skeleton, the structure of the body relating to itself. The skeleton helps me to think about the body in relationship to itself, and it sort of helps me to melt the idea of muscles off so that I sort of have a lighter experience of relating the parts of my body to themselves. So you don't need perfect posture. In fact, I actually rarely ever use the word posture in lessons because to me, posture connotes this idea of rigidity, stillness, So I like to have any kind of idea that promotes movement and fluidity. So with dynamic alignment, what we are trying to do is to alleviate any static engagements that are unnecessary, that can often inhibit the free flow of air, balancing with vibration, and tract shaping that will create free and balanced sound no matter what frequency we're trying to sing. So this structure of my skeleton in alignment is going to set up a really wonderful environment for the breath system to work well, therefore the phonatory system, therefore the resonance system, and all of them together. If my body is not relating well, then all of the other factors that come after that are going to struggle. So there are 3 fast checks that you can do with your skeletal alignment. So if you just visualize your skeleton, think about your pelvic bowl, think about your rib cage, and think about your skull. So pelvis, ribs, skull. So with your pelvis and ribs, I like to really think about them interrelating. So notice how the bowl of your pelvis has a mirror image to the bottom of your rib cage. They're kind of these like little magnets. They kind of do this mirror dance with each other. So I find if I'm thinking of my pelvis in relationship to the rib cage, they start talking, and that's a wonderful central zone for them to come into alignment. Then if I follow up through my rib cage to my head, notice the skull. Where is your skull living? Most people in the world have skulls that live in front of their rib cage for several reasons. A lot of times we want to enter a room with our head before letting the rest of the body come in because the brain's trying to figure out the situation. And then a lot of people are just on screens and on a phone. I was walking down the street in Boston the other day and I looked in, it was a bar. It was about 5 p.m. so it wasn't super busy yet. But I looked and there was a bartender just kind of hanging out just on his phone, and I thought, gosh, how many times are we in this posture, this sort of slumped posture? And it becomes normal. So when we do move the ears into a relationship over the rib cage, it feels quite strange. And when people start to make this more familiar, often people report they feel like their head's going to fall off the back of their body. A good way to do this is just to lean against a wall, aligning your hips, your rib cage, and the back of your head against a comfortable wall, moving your feet out about a foot out from the wall, and just feeling that alignment. Lying on the floor with your knees bent is another good way to feel this alignment. So I say all of these are neighborhoods: pelvis, ribs, head. They're all relating to each other. They can move, they can shift from where they are, and they can always come back into what I call home neighborhood. All right. So from those three zones, just notice how quickly you can scan up and down the body and just notice the torso to the head, the pelvis to the torso to the head. Yeah. And then along with that, it's really important to think about your knees. Are your knees nice and soft? I call them buttery knees. Are your knees buttery? And then feet, feeling that tripod of weight shifting on the feet. Two little weight points in the balls of the feet, one weight point there in the heel. So if we're standing, feet to knees, pelvis, ribs, head. So, we don't always stand to sing. But even if I hum a little scale and shift the relationship of my skeleton, you can hear the changes. So I'll even sort of motion when I'm changing things. So if I just go, I'm going to line up or relate. I'll say relate. Just noticing what happens if I'm moving the rib cage. So just a little hum exercise like that, moving different parts of the skeleton into different areas. It's just good evidence building for oh, that's what happens when those parts of my body become less aligned. So what you want to build when the alignment is collaborative instead of rigid, the breath can really drop in, that vibration is freer, and your high notes or all your notes are going to be moving through a much easier environment. Even the way you inhale, if we're aware of the skeleton relating to each other, is going to be affected. So like even if you collapse your ribs and then you inhale into a collapsed rib cage, notice that's going to pull air, as opposed to if I'm letting the sternum open up a little bit, let the rib cage feel kind of buoyant as I blow my air out. The inhale can be quite easy coming in. So again, pelvis, rib cage, head. Are your ears floating over your shoulders is a good little check. And then knees, feet, ground. And then just notice how quickly you can scan up and down the body. So if you're in a phrase and you notice you're out of alignment, you can think, oh, on the next phrase, okay, I can take a breath and I can bring myself back into helpful alignment. All right, setup habit number 2, torso suppleness and exhale management. So let's talk about what's actually generating exhale, because it's one of the most misunderstood parts around singing in general and your high notes. So there is not one breathing strategy for every style. You've got what you need for belting, what you need for Western classically informed, what they might call legit singing in musical theater. Not a great term, but that's what they still call it. A speech mix sort of situation where you're in sort of like your speech mode and singing things that sound very akin to talking. Contemporary commercial styles, all across the board, they all ask for slightly different breath balances, the way you're inhaling and exhaling. So it's really important to be aware of how your torso is coordinating for these different styles. But a unifying principle is this: a supple torso is going to give you a lot more options. So a rigid torso, a rigid anything in the body, is going to force you it's going to really paint you in a corner. You're going to have less room to move from one place to another. And even as you're supporting or moving breath out, if things are rigid and locked, there's only so far that they can go after that point. A supple torso is going to give me more options. That's why I like to use the word neighborhood. If I'm singing, I'm moving. Something is always moving as I'm singing. As I'm talking to you right now, my abdominal wall is coming in very slowly as it's moving air through my folds out to you. My rib cage is kind of relaxed and chill. And even if I were to lift my rib cage and start to talk to you from just an abdominally driven place, you can hear how the density of the sound changes. And then if I move my ribs down a little bit and let the torso collapse a little bit, you can hear a little bit more air pressure underneath that. So just being aware of the coordinations of my torso and how they affect breath pressure, therefore vibratory pattern. So the suppleness in your torso is what's going to give you options. We want options. I like to call that vocal wealth. I have lots of choices on the table that I can pick from. So instead of thinking one way to breathe, like I told you, there's one way I think my ribs are floating and then my abdominals are moving the air out. That's one way to do it. I can have one where both the ribs and the abdominals are coming in together. I can have one that's very rib driven. So you want to ask yourself, is my torso free to move? Is my torso free to move? That's why we do lots of torso loosening up and stretching exercises when we prepare to sing. Do I know what's driving my exhale right now? Is it mostly abdominals? Is it mostly ribs? Is it abdominals and ribs together? What kind of abdominal engagement is letting the exhale move through? Am I tightening something or am I holding something in static engagement that is not helping? These are big questions. A lot of times when we hold large muscle groups in the torso, that has a lot of effect on what kind of pressure we're moving through the folds. It can disrupt things like vibrato. It can cause lots of subglottal pressure that's hard to manage. Lots of things to consider. So it's just really tuning into, how does my torso let air in? What are the components of the muscular groups that are making my thorax bigger, and then the muscle groups that are then letting my thorax become smaller so that the lungs become smaller and air moves out. Just being curious about how the mechanics work. Really, really huge, helpful idea. So let me show you two extremes in order to demonstrate that. So if I'm using some rigidity in the torso, that's going to instantly pressurize the larynx. That's going to make high notes feel like a really heavy climb. So if I take a breath in and I go, he, that's a pretty easy, even movement of the torso. If I really engage the rectus abdominis and my rib cage, I'll do one that's kind of balanced and then I'll go rigid. Okay, so balanced, he. So you see that I have really squeezed the abs, I've really squeezed the rib cage. Lots of pressure coming up for the larynx to manage. If I really leave the larynx alone and just let the breath do whatever how affect the larynx in any way, he. So that'll really blow through. If I'm not resisting with the larynx, that'll blow through a very breathy sound. So if I collapse the torso, that also is no bueno, because he. So just play around with different ways to configure the balloon. I've had students who had teachers to encourage them to relax the rib cage sometimes, but for some people that can turn into pressurized collapse. So you just have to be very aware of your body, what kind of configuration is creating the air pressure and vibrational pattern that works best for you. What we want is a responsive torso, something that can meet the demands of the phrase and the style that you want to sing, so that you have options. Again, I will do 3 patterns of torso engagement. This will be my ribs floating and abdominals driving the air. So more of a bel canto classical style. If I go to more of like musical theater, Western classically informed, a little bit of shaky shake in there, I'd want to adjust that. And then if I were really going to go, or even if I change the style up a little bit to more of a contemporary sound in musical theater, a little bit more pressures from the ribs and the abdominals. And then if I emphasize the ribs, so different options there. You see there's more pressure that I'm using with a little bit more rib squeeze. So that could be, that's coming into more rock styles or more intense belting styles. So you hear the differences in how you can provide air from the torso. And again, it depends on the style. Depends on the style, whatever sound you want to make. But just know you have options. There's not one way to breathe. There's not one way to let air in. There's not one way to move it out. It's just good to know. We really drive ourselves crazy trying to find the right way to do something. There is a helpful way to do a certain thing. And even within the same style, there are different strategies you can use. So really open up to curiosity about that. I want to encourage you. And then you can ask yourself, is my breath being generated by overall abdominal engagement? Is my rib space contributing? What's the blend of those two things. So you really have two main groups that can contribute to air moving out, right? So the abdominals coming in, helping the diaphragm to slowly relax up, and then what's the rib cage doing? Yeah, so lots of options. Your body will answer when you just pay attention. You literally just go in and think, oh, what's going on? I'd like to understand. You'll get some answers and probably a lot more clarity than you expect. Your high notes will thank you for giving them room to happen. So again, and we'll get into how the breath is affected by how breath affects phonatory pattern and is affected by phonatory pattern in the next step. And if this kind of systems level setup is really helpful for you, be sure to check out the free voice map overview that shows you all 7 systems of the voice and how they interact. It has helped a lot of singers understand why their high notes feel the way they do and lots of other confusing parts about singing. So you can download that anytime. The link is in the description. All right, so setup habit number 3. So we did skeleton. We've done breath system. So setup habit number 3 is balanced phonation. Balanced phonation. And so being aware of the options of phonatory patterns. Most high note problems are not range problems necessarily. They are about phonation coordination. Phonation coordination. So let's look at this continuum of possibility. Phonation meaning the manner in which your vocal folds are vibrating. I can have a breathy phonation. I can have a really pressed phonation, and I can have a rather balanced phonation. So breathy, my folds are spending more time apart, less time together. Pressed, my folds are spending more time together and less time apart. And balanced is going to be more of like a 50-50 situation where the vibration is together as much as it is apart. And then you have a continuum all the way through. So I ran out of breath on the breathy. Yeah, so, but you can play around with this continuum of option on just phonatory pattern. Then notice how breath contributes to phonatory pattern. Notice how phonatory pattern talks to breath. Everything in the systems of the voice are always talking to each other. It's always a multi-directional dialogue. So if you start a phrase breathy, your high note might be underfed. It depends on what high note you want to sing. So if I'm just doing, let's just go from C to G4. So if I start that on a very breathy sound, and I'm talking about higher notes in mode 1 right now, yeah? Hey, I can accomplish that with a breathy sound, but the air is moving fast. That might be a sound I want to make. Who knows? If I really press it, hey, so that's a lot of closure and a lot of together time in that vibrational pattern. Hey. So there might be a call for me to make that sound at some point, but you feel it's a little overpressurized. Even as I speak with more presence in my voice, it's like, oh, calm down, gosh, like relax. You can feel that in the body because it's like the sound waves are like, they're really pressing out toward you. And that's a big mistake sometimes we make as singers because I've got to project my voice. And that turns into really closed phase, and then it makes the listener feel a little pushed against rather than invited in. A 50-50 pattern is going to have generous vibratory energy coming out, and it also has enough openness so you can feel, oh, I am invited into this singer's world. So pay attention to that when you hear different vibratory patterns, how they make you feel. A breathy sound might even invite you in even more if it's a very authentically breathy sound. Think about like late night. This is late night jazz with late night jazz host. Yeah, so you've got that that very breathy sound. It's like, come on in, this is very intimate. As opposed to, I'm going to sell you a car, I'm going to sell some bonds to you. So anyway, think about what those different vibratory patterns, what kind of story they tell, what kind of intent, ego identity they present. Really important questions to ask. But if you start a phrase with a balance of phonation, balance of phonatory pattern, it's going to set you up for most of the phrase with that balanced pattern. So the way we begin a phrase often sets up the way the rest of the phrase is going to go. I'm not saying you can't change mid-phrase, but it's good to plan how we want to set certain things up. So even if you can play around with this through hums and openings. So just like I can do like a breathy, and then you can open that up to a vowel from the nose to the mouth. So you have these options. And a lot of times these hums, they also can help you. This is really good for if you feel like you're overpressurizing in order to take some pressure off. So let's say there's this phrase from Hunchback by Alan Menken and Stephen Schwartz. So I can play around with that in those different phonatory patterns. So if I go breathy, if I were in their skin, and see the air goes very fast. I treasure, harder, yeah? every instant. Okay, so some are coming through. It's, it's a little breathy. Now that can take it to very, very together. If I were in, and I could already feel like it's like very pressurized in there. If I were in their skin. See, I can't even. I'm still getting over. I had COVID and some respiratory things going on, so I'm still getting over that, and so my voice isn't even able to like manage that with that amount of press. See what happens with that I vowel. If I were in their skin, I have to really shape the track to like make that come through. I treasure. So yeah, that's quite pressed. You give that's enough. Calm down. All right. So yeah. Balance. And then even with this, actually, I'm even going to take it like between balanced and aspirate. I'm just going to give it a little less closed phase, okay? More open phase. See what happens, right? So there, to check it out, I've just, now's a good moment to say, oh, wait, what's happening? Okay, wait. Go to my body, my skeleton, pelvis, ribs, head. All right, good. There that is. Now, noticing my breath system. What kind of inhale is this? I'm going to ask my body, how much air do I need? Cool. My body's telling me what kind of support do I need. Okay. And I'm going to try this gentle phonatory pattern, kind of like on the light side of balanced, yeah? If I were in their skin, I treasure every instant. So that felt pretty good. I could even play around with it being even lighter, actually, because when I got near the end of the phrase, it started to feel a little pressurized more than I wanted it to. So I could just try it again. I'll take it over here a little bit. So if, around there, yeah? Which is tricky because on a climactic part of the song, we want to do the whole thing. But this is where you say, how do I collaborate with the song? What's the song already doing? And how do I play my part in the storytelling? If, skeleton, breath, alignment, phonatory pattern. If I were in their skin, I treasure every instant out there. Yeah, so that's feeling much better. And I'm noticing I have a temptation to really vibrate pretty hard, especially since my voice isn't quite back yet. A lot of muscles want to come in and like, oh gosh, you need our support. When you're getting over an illness and your voice is still kind of, thick and juicy like this, it's a really good opportunity to be like, wait, how will technique work for me? So that's a good question to ask. Okay, so skeleton, breath system, phonatory pattern. Those are the three we've done so far. And again, if you're starting to feeling overpressurized, pause. Little gentle onsets, little sighs, just to release pressure off, and then go back in with a renewed sense of what kind of pressurization do we need. Okay, so habit number 4, tract shape. So we've gone skeleton, breath system, phonatory pattern, tract shape. What is going on from where the folds are vibrating to the opening of your mouth or nose? That is the vocal tract. So we want to embrace a shape that supports the kind of note that we want to sing. So like back there on Out There, I was just doing, if I were in their skin, I'd treasure. I use those shapes. If I were singing that as a classical singer, my shape would be a little different. It would probably sound more like, if I were in their skin, I'd treasure. It would shape like that. So it would sound more like, if I were in their skin. Yeah. But anyway, but the shape and the phonatory pattern are different. So even there, I was pushing a little bit. So let me go back to phonatory pattern. I'm going to flip my ribs and I'm going to provide with abdominals on this. If I were in their skin. So I'm playing around with the phonatory pattern there. And that's going to talk back to breath. Breath's going to talk to that. So good little experiments. But do you notice how the if I were in their skin, that's that vowel shape. If I were in their skin is more of the contemporary. If I were in their skin, that I vowel right now. Skin-eyed is so different vowel shapes. So let me tell you what I'm doing. Your vocal tract has a tremendous effect on registration and what's going on in the vocal fold level, okay? So the way that we are narrowing or opening things and the vowels we sing, huge impact on what's going on a registration level. So some main levers that matter here is just we're gonna leverage, and there's a whole video about this that I can link in the description. We're gonna leverage this anterior posterior narrowing of the tongue, okay? So the back of the tongue is able to move backward into the pharyngeal space that narrows the acoustic channel. And think about if you put your thumb over the end of a garden hose. If I add pressure, what that feels like. That's what's going on with narrowing of the tongue. So even if I just go, if I'm gonna widen and narrow on this same interval. If that is just back of tongue moving. That's all that I'm moving, yeah? So that has a big, big impact. And you can practice this by biting the tongue like this, softening the tongue, and then you can hum. The increase in volume is me narrowing the tongue back. So you bite the tongue, and you can play around with just isolating the back of the tongue to feel that isolation. So that's anterior, posterior narrowing of the back of the tongue. That's a big deal. If the tongue is not narrow enough there, it won't support mode 1, yeah? And even when you're in mode 2, it's very supportive of acoustic energy. It's something we use all the time. Then beyond that, we want to think about the tongue position supporting the vowel. So what kind of vowel are we singing? And then certain vowels support remaining in mode 1, moving higher than other ones, yeah? So like vowels like a, e, even I, those vowels really support mode 1, whereas vowels like oo and e, those vowels move into mode 2 a lot faster because of the acoustic shape. Yeah, there's also another video on that I can link in the description that talks about vowels and formants, okay? So your pharyngeal narrowing, your tongue position supporting the vowel. So like say on an E vowel, if I'm moving higher on an E vowel, I have to switch my E vowel from E to I. Notice what happens to the top of your tongue. You're going from E, which is very high and forward toward the alveolar ridge, and then it comes down, E. When my tongue comes down, that makes that first compartment of acoustic space from my larynx to the top of my tongue smaller. Therefore, higher frequency. The higher frequency is going to support mode 1 to a higher level than if my tongue is higher, that's a lower frequency, and it's going to break over into mode 2 very quickly. So that's me not modifying it. It will naturally flip over into mode 2. If I modify to I, and you notice I lowered my jaw, my tongue moved from E to I. That will support mode 1. If I'm singing an ooh, yeah, ooh naturally wants to yodel right over into mode 2. So I'll have to move from ooh to Notice how ooh is high in the back. Ooh, ooh, and it comes down for like book. Ooh, ooh, ooh. So I'm modifying from oo to in order to maintain mode 1. So tongue position for vowel in order to give you the acoustic environment that particular pitch needs, all right? So we've got pharyngeal narrowing, anterior, posterior narrowing, vowel, and then also what's going on with the soft palate. We want a soft palate that can move. And again, the soft palate's going to be in different locations. If I have a low soft palate, it's going to encourage a lot of high overtone. If I have a very high soft palate, that's going to encourage more low frequency because the space has gotten bigger. So even if I take that phrase and I'd sing it with a low soft palate, if I sing it with a very high soft palate, if I were, so that's quite lofty. I kind of want to split the difference on that. A little lower soft palate, like medium soft palate, more speech-like. If I were, yeah, so if I were, yeah, so those are different levers. So that little soft palate is quite an elevator that we can also tune into. Thinking about sort of like a backward smile, back in behind your top molars. Sometimes I think about the soft palate tickling your tubes of your ears. That's a helpful one. And even feeling sort of this backward width into the pharynx is very helpful. That's the engagement of that arched muscle called the palatopharyngeus. That's that beautiful arched muscle that gives the pharynx shape. So we're thinking about opening that kind of space, which is tricky because as we're opening, we're also softening the swallow muscles. I talk about this in the vocal tract series of videos too, where I speak specifically about managed constriction. You can check that out in there. I'll put that in the description too. I'll have a whole list of videos in the description for you. So yeah, pharyngeal narrowing, meaning anterior posterior narrowing of the tongue, the actual relationship of the tongue to hard palate for vowel, and soft palate management. So what often can happen on high notes, on the way up, the swallow muscles, that's these right here. Boom, boom, boom. Those are your pharyngeal constrictors. Your swallow muscles, they really want to help. They want to come to the party and help. So if I'm they'll want to kind of squeeze in laterally like this. Because they're thinking, I'm going to help this vibrate. It's really, because everything's so close together. So we have to let those swallow muscles soften and create some width to let them sort of like open out. Depending on where my larynx wants to go. Yeah. So that is going to give the high frequency some acoustic space where it can adjust and live. And then we go back to these other factors we've been talking about: alignment, breath management, phonatory pattern. So if all of these are working really hard, you're already getting a lot of activity here that's going to be hard to manage. So that's why we're thinking on a systems level. And then we're back in the tract. I'm going to have enough narrowing here, enough loft in the soft palate, and a favorable vowel. Like on this, if I were, not that I would sing an E vowel, but if I don't have enough tongue narrowing on that, if I were, that can be a problem. Yeah, so that's something we'd have to check out. All right, so that's your pharyngeal space. And again, look, there are lots of different ways that you can move things through. What if you take the ascending phrase from My Dream to Dream, still a Victor Hugo novel, right? So I'm using shame. The vowel is an air vowel. So I'm gonna go skeleton, breath, phonatory pattern. Again, I'm gonna like err on the side of like a little more open balance. As they turn your dreams to shame. Okay, I've got narrowing, I've got palate loft, and I've got vowel accuracy. As they turn your dreams to shame. How much breath do I need? What's the skeleton doing? Yeah, how is it providing that breath? As they turn your dreams. See, that wanted to crack because I need an air vowel in my mouth for that. Turn. As they turn your dreams to shame. So that I had to go shame, and I let my larynx sort of float up in order to let that higher note happen. So it's really mapping what's going on in the tract. If I don't have enough narrowing here, already there. It probably wouldn't crack as early as it does today, but it will now. That's literally like 2 millimeters of narrowing in the tongue that makes that difference, okay? Literally I just want you to see if the voice is cracking, it's an acoustic thing. Yeah, so that is literally millimeters of movement in the back of my tongue that is causing that abrupt crack or that abrupt break into mode 2 that you're hearing. So I just want you to know the acoustic shape is huge when it comes to what's going on in the phonatory pattern. So if you are experiencing shifts into mode 2 like that you don't want, really take heart, okay? Because it's something that you can work out, all right? And I remember when I learned how precise it was, what the precision of the vocal tract positioning that was required in order to let something stay in mode 1. It was such a relief to know. I was like, oh, it is this precise. Okay, and this is something I can train. And then it becomes something you can rely upon, yeah, when you get these habits into procedural memory. And again, you can go up in different shapes. So if I wanted to make a shape like this, ha, 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 very spread, low palate. That's a sound I can make. Ha, that's a sound I can make as well. It can be a lot wider. Thinking of that, what's this bucket? In, yeah, all fades away. Yeah, da da da. Yeah, so these are gonna have a little more open cried out sound there. That wouldn't sound like the character if that were yeah, different. But then the spready bright sound would be right for other things. So remember, your high notes and all notes, every note you sing, it happens before you sing it. The way you're breathing, the way the body is set up, the concept of the phonatory pattern and the shaping of the tract. All of that is going to be happening before vibration is out here in the room. And when it's out here in the room, that's past tense. Remember that we can only be present with the present activity of our body. So remember, you want to find dynamic alignment in the body. If you notice the body's out of dynamic alignment, on your next breath, you can come back through home neighborhood and relate it again. You want to keep the torso supple. Know what is providing the exhale, what you want to provide the exhale. And then be aware of your phonatory patterns. Am I in a balanced pattern? Am I in a very aspirate pattern? Am I in a more pressed pattern? You'd call that pressed, or more closed phase. And then you're going to be thinking about vocal tract. As you're moving through these systems, how is the shape of your vocal tract supporting what you want to do? So you can take these one at a time. I'll take the phrase through thinking about my alignment. I'll take the phrase through thinking about how I'm providing breath. I'll take the phrase through thinking about the balance of my phonation and try different things there. I'll take the phrase through trying different shapes in the tract. And with those tools, you can figure a lot out about how you can access high notes. The one other thing that I do want to say about high notes is when we sing a higher pitch, especially this goes with phonatory pattern, when you sing a higher pitch, the density is going to decrease. The folds are stretching. You are going to be singing. If I'm trying to make this A4 as dense as this D4, that's not going to work very well. You have to give the folds ability to stretch and to let the density be a little lighter as you go higher. So remember that too. That's a very important point. If you want to go deeper into how all of this fits together, really understand the voice on a systems level, you can download the free voice map overview below. That'll show you the 7 systems of singing, how they interact, and how to troubleshoot the parts that will get you the results you want probably fastest. And it also has links to lots of deep dive videos that will help you integrate these things and have a systems level understanding of your voice, so you know how everything is interacting and that you have actual command over your experience from a voice science, evidence-based framework. From there, you're always welcome to join us in the resource library community. It's a wonderful community. We have 2 Q&As every month, and it's a terrific group of supportive people. A whole library of tools, private lesson tools at your disposal when and where you need them, and I'm adding resources to that at all times. And I hope this video helped you. If it did, please feel free to like and subscribe. Share this with any other singers you think would benefit from this information. And please remember, most of all, there is only one you, and somebody would love to hear this story. Only you can sing. Love much. Now go sing.